Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Babies with Knives. This morning, we are going to be doing a character gen session for Champions Now by Ron Edwards. Ron Edwards is with us here. I'm your hostess, Lala Twiddle, aka Alice Peng. I did that in reverse, didn't I? With me is also Brandon Powers, my ever-present co-host.
Howdy, howdy.
And our BWK slave, our dear friend Nick Garber.
Hey, everyone.
And Ron's going to be walking us through how to create characters in Champions Now. This is a throwback to early editions of Hero Games Champion system, which is going to be very different than what people are accustomed to if you play 4th, 5th, or 6th edition Hero system / Champions, because this was before they put all their systems from the company together. Right, Ron? Yes.
Fabulous.
So, throwing it to you, Ron. Take us away.
The first thing would be 2 statements.
Okay.
And I'll give you 2 statements. And then you're going to do a thing. And each one of you will do it independently. The 2 statements, I'm making this up right now. Let's see. The first one has to do with heroes, supers, powers. Your powers are bright, fun, and fast. So superpowers are a bright, fun, fast thing.
Okay. And
so that is the first statement.
Mm-hmm.
Statement number 2. Coming of age self-discovery in a scary world. And somebody here name a community, preferably a city, but whatever, that you know super well. I mean, really well. You grew up there, you live in it now, you know its ins and outs. Where?
Burlingame, California.
Burlingame. There we are. Okay. SoCal.
Central Cal. It's in San Francisco Bay Area.
No, okay. So we're in the Bay Area. Excellent.
San Francisco Bay Area.
I actually happen to have grown up in the Monterey Bay Area.
Oh, okay.
Oh, beautiful. My
Yes.
grandmother lived in Watsonville.
Yeah.
I was Peninsula.
I was Peninsula.
So I was down there all
Pacific
the time.
Coast.
Awesome.
Modesto.
Oh, nice.
We're all
So-
Bay Area-ish areas.
Yeah, okay. Well, interesting.
I was born in Walnut Creek.
Okay, left coasters. Interesting. It's been a long time. Okay, so here we go.
I'm in Texas.
We have those. So that's our location. And so that's the way it's done. 2 statements. One's kind of super oriented and the other one is more dramatic oriented, whatever you want to call it. And a location is chosen based on somebody in the group knowing it. So you actually turn into kind of our setting GM in some ways.
Cool.
If you want, draw a triangle. One corner says the person, one corner says the powers, one corner says the problems, and this is sketchy stuff, right? It's not, you're not doing this in blood. This is kind of like what the comics artists call the Crucible of Crazy. You just draw a million thumbnails and happily get some ideas down, and whatever makes sense, you pop it in. Another one occurs to you because it goes with that one. You draw it next to it, So that's what we're doing here. This is the Crucible of Crazy sketchy start. But we've got the 3 corners, right? Person, powers, problems. Don't talk to each other right now. Just write stuff in. So, Alice, you seemed like you were kind of getting there first. So what do you have, roughly?
So I was thinking someone of mixed heritage, child of a landscaper, has grown up in the gardens and loves plants. As for superpowers, I kept with the plant theme, so travels through plants, plant control, and life manipulation through medicinal plants. As for problems, I grew up in a poor family that could barely afford to raise the children that they had, and I ended up being the youngest of 5 or 6 kids, so that didn't help the situation. And I'm looking at being a student at the moment, trying to work multiple jobs while paying myself through college.
Right. Okay. So we've got that happening. Very much the okay, good news. Now, what do we have for, say, Brandon?
I was looking at an individual named Xander, 20-something, computer technical, still going to school and learning, his field and trying to survive basically in a market that's over flooded with people that have similar things, similar skill sets. And so problems are like struggling for rent, food, also being a survivor of the Hillsdale school shooting that was down in San Mateo. Being from a mixed Middle Eastern, Chinese background, having in current climate having some cultural problems. The powers that I saw for him was I titled it Cosmic Light. And it's brought through a connection to the One, which goes back to, the fact that he kind of grew up as an atheist and then touched something greater. And the light also, when he brings the light forward, there is an auditory manifestation to that light as well, kind of like a chorus of angels type singing.
Awesome. So we have our hippie trippy scary divinity thing happening here. Got it. So I think we're already seeing a couple of similarities here and there. What we have now is a look at what I call situations. That is a rename for the term disadvantages. I'm not the first one to rename that. The 6th edition champions renamed them complications, which is perfectly rational. But I decided to take it a little further, looking literally at what we used them for back in the 80s, was what situations do I expect my character to be in? Either because I put my character in those situations, I'm going to go see my spouse now, or I'm going to go, deal with this or that problem on my sheet. But also the GM, too, looking at those disadvantages, as we called them, would say, aha, this is where I'm going to stick you. The philosophy of it is a little different.
Okay.
These, again, are not disadvantages. These are things that you want your character to be confronting. Mm-hmm. These are the situations you want to be in. I will point out a couple of things. One is that dependent non-player characters and hunteds are rated rather differently. And in particular, dependent non-player characters, it has nothing to do with how strong or how powerful they are. It has to do with their problems. They have situations of their own.
Okay.
So in other words, their problems are your problems. All you do is you find situations for them, and that's how much that non-player character is worth.
I actually like, in some ways, that the complications or situations in this game comes before a lot of the other character creations, because you actually know your final pool of points going in, rather than, I am at this many points, now right. I'm going to go and see what points I can wrangle up.
Correct. It can go the other way, because just like in the old champions, really the presumption was that you started at 250 points and you just did that. It wasn't as though you were building it up. But it is true that it's kind of nice to know. And in this case, given the currency of the points here kind of like have more bang than they do in the other versions. So a 200-point character is a nice, solid starting character. So we're looking at, since I'm using the old logic, I didn't shoot this sacred cow. 100 free points, or 100 points plus 100 from situations. 200. There's one that's not present in other versions. It's called side effects. And it is defined as an attack power that hits you. And during whenever you do a specific thing that kicks it off. And it's either something you do or it's something that someone else does or can happen. So the points you get from it are the points of the power. And you don't get any defenses against it.
Okay.
Right, it just nails you. So there are a couple of them which are, variable points because of that. You'll find a couple of things are a little different as well. Frequency is gone. Like you don't roll to see whether a hunted shows up or not. It's just taken as a given that they'll be in when they're in, and their actual magnitude of points isn't the issue.
Yeah, they're much lower because people tend to go, oh, I don't know what else to take. I'll just take a hunted.
That's right. Hunted by a supervillain group. Right, 30 points.
Because
right.
It's a ton of points. And I noticed that it's much lower on points, so it's not going to be your go-to, I need point fillers.
Yeah. Now, again, we're not looking for 150, so you're not quite as under the gun. Each one of these is something that you'd be looking forward to see as a player. You're choosing these, after all, not me. So in many ways, you're handing me instructions when you give me them.
Yeah, and what do you want your character, which is something I've tried to explain to lots of people, but they always look at the complications, disadvantages, whatever you call them in different systems, as, oh, this is going to screw my character. And it's like, no, how many points are we looking for here, by the way?
100 points of disadvantages.
100, okay.
Situations, but yes.
Yes, situations.
Thank
you.
Just being pedantic.
Oh, no, I appreciate because, good to know the terminology of the game. You'll find that it shouldn't be too hard. You can even specialize a little. Oh, one other thing. You're maxed at 50 points per type. So instead of reduced amounts when you take like multiple versions, you just can't take more than 50 points of a given type. So, for example, Moon Knight with 3 secret identities could have 45 points in identities. Cool.
And so it's possible to really sort of skew your character. Okay, my character's relationship heavy. It's pretty much all going to be non-player characters and hunteds and one or two, maybe one other thing. And you can get 100 points out of that if you really push those hard. Same thing, if you want your character, playtest had the enjoyable situation of a character who was susceptible, vulnerable, and dependent to the same substance. Which, of course, racked up plenty of points.
So, I'm looking at having a situation where I have to basically sunbathe or be in the sunlight regularly. I don't think that in the way that this is set up, dependence is a good option for that. Would you disagree with that?
Well, it depends. I mean, dependence basically says get out there in the sun once a day or so, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And how is that not what you thought in mind?
I will stick with dependence. That sounds good.
Yeah. And I grant you that it is a little bit on the blunt side. Basically, you just take damage. Aren't there a couple of options there? I'm not looking at my file right now, so I don't know if there are a couple of options that.
Your hero requires a substance or environment, either constantly or at regular intervals, no greater than 12 hours. In situations using the speed chart, 3d6 destructive knockout damage applies per phase with no defense. In other situations, the hero is debilitated as if drained. Right. So I would be looking at being drained. Right.
So effectively, you would be drained
tired.
Right. Your endurance would be low without that fairly frequent exposure. Mm-hmm. The idea being that were you in a combat situation, the debilitation would be far more severe for strictly dramatic purposes, and you'd be taking plenty of damage from this. But we don't have to have a stopwatch when you're out of combat and say, oh, well, every 30 seconds you're going to take this damage. That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. We just drain you a little. So that's that. So you're looking at your character. I start to become very, very interested in whether this, in fact, for both of you, I become very interested in this identity issue. Public identity, secret identity, both, neither. Or in many other permutations are possible. What this means is I'm curious about how your superhero-ness relates to the people around you and the society around you.
By all means, I was looking at a secret ID on the
Solid
character.
secret. How about you, Alice?
I'm looking at secret ID.
Okay, so that's actually a fairly interesting point that we're talking about people. This actually matches a lot of what I heard before, that both of your characters are really committed to the ordinary life that they live.
Yeah, my character has 30 points in dependent NPCs, one being at 10 points where my mother suffers from chronic illnesses, so needs a lot of help from the kids.
Right.
And I was thinking that I had the unfortunate, do you know like Water for Chocolate?
I do.
Okay, so youngest child can't go off and marry because they have to stay home and take care of the. So
you have some sort of expectation hammered
to be
on
there,
you
yes.
about this. Yes.
And in addition, I have a 20.1 for the fact that one of my older siblings decided to go down the wrong path, drugs or
Right.
other things.
So you've got yourself all familyed out here.
Yes.
So familyed out here plus secret identity and this whole sort of.
Yeah, and I have some psych limitations as well.
Tell me what you have in mind.
I was just writing those out. So I've got secret ID, that's 15 unusual looks of the heritage at 5, being, from Middle Eastern and Asian descent.
Okay, so prejudicial kind of thing. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Psychological limitation, code versus killing, sometimes meltdown. DNPC that has a number of friends and family that are illegals, and those would be hunted by ICE.
Right.
So that's, as far as I saw, that'd be about 25 points on that.
You took 2 of the same ones I took, which is.
Did you get ICE as well?
I took illegal illegals as family friends, and I took the fact that being mixed heritage will get me in trouble.
Right. Let's talk about killing. There's no killing attacks.
Okay.
We don't have the killing attack rules are gone. Realize that we are that first of all, non-player characters, ordinary people, can be killed very easily in this game. Psychological situations are not mandates. This isn't a contract on your part saying, I won't do this. Ever. So if you're saying, well, he would if he had to, I better make it sometimes, that's the wrong logic. The point is, how often do you want to express that position, even when you occasionally break it?
If I drop that off, I think I'm at 100, and what you're talking about I already have, which is a psych limit, do not dishonor your family, with an irrational response. Then the last one was a vulnerability to profane powers.
Interesting,
and
yes.
I took uncommon on that.
Right. Now, that works just fine. Yeah. So cool. Does that put you at about 100?
I think that puts me at 100. That's 55. Yeah, that's 100.
All right. So looking at these, we're getting sort of an interesting idea. Now we're going to go to the flip side of the ledger, which is these other points. And I want to talk to you a little bit about other points in these versions of Champions, which is that Tony Stark has no points in wealth. Doctor Doom has no points in Latveria. The Fantastic Four, well, actually they do later, but in the beginning, they have no points in the Baxter Building, or any number of other things of that kind. Peter Parker does not have points in being a photographer. It's even in the rules as the example. They say a character could be a professional photographer. Go ahead. And yes, they can do anything with photography. There's no points. There's very, very few skills. If you go down to the next section and look at the past characteristics, look at the skills, you're going to see a very few skills. All of them are very over the top. They're comic book skills. Anybody can be a professional computer programmer for no points. Computer programming is basically a power. Any of the skills listed there is basically a power. It means you can do the crazy stuff with it. So all the skills that your character may have, languages, all the social situations, associates, contacts, all the wealth, all the status, all those things, no points.
And there's only 6 skills that you actually pay for 5 points each.
Correct. Those are the utility skills. They don't count things like skill levels and luck and stuff, but yes. And those skills are pretty freaky. I mean, these are really ridiculous security systems, ridiculous stealth. So let's take a look at a couple of things. We've got characteristics, skills, and powers, and in many ways, I do not mind if you bounce around among them. We don't have to fill up each one, sequentially. And when we look at the characteristics, you will see that strength and presence are rated in dice. The currency is exactly the same. It's 5 points per die, and you have 2d6 for as a base. So it's pretty much the same point structure as it was in the early Champions. And then let's bounce down to the bottom 3, which are dexterity, intelligence, and ego. You will notice that they are on a completely different scale. Those numbers that you're looking at are actually your target number on 3d6. That is the value. So there's no derivation, no algebra, no nothing that you have to do to figure out your roll. That is the roll. So your base is 11 or less, and it's 10 points per to go up for all of them. So that's how those work. You may be interested to know, if you may recall, the somewhat stepwise derivation of what's called combat value in the other games, in the previous games, and that's not here. You will be using either dexterity or ego directly in combat. So that number is actually your operative number. It will be altered by their number, but that's the number. You don't have some other box that says combat value. It's not there. So far, so good on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. So then we get weird. We'll bump to the middle there of the characteristics. Speed, we have a scale of 6, not 12. So there's 6 little segments of activity. And so your baseline is 1. And that means you would be going in the middle of the speed chart. So a bunch of people would go before you. And it's 10 points per to bring it up. And then, and given the scale, it's roughly half. If you wanted to be a nice, solid, I go a lot kind of character, then 3 is great. 4 is real active. And anything above that is possible, but I would warn you about your endurance costs at that point. As I say, greedy for speedy means you fall over. So that's the idea. But it's just like Speed 4 was a slowish but functional character in the old Champions, Speed 2, although it sounds horrible, really isn't. I mean, you can do it. It is a working possibility.
That's cool, because
So,
I remember fourth
yeah.
or 5th edition we were playing, and Speed 2 just felt like it was completely undoable with the tables that we dealt with.
It is. I mean, that's the baseline in that system. Here, Speed 1 is the baseline, and I would say that those are too slow, for a hero. When you take a look, oh, by the way, you don't have to derive it from dexterity or anything. All of these are independently bought from base, and that's done. Body is an interesting thing. Constitution's gone. You get your body, and that sets all of your physicality up. You will have all your numbers just as a function of body. So if you want to know, how many points till I get knocked out? Well, that's taken from body. It's 3 times body. How many points do I take and then I lose the rounds, because I've been stunned? That's twice your body. How many points do I get when I recover? That's your body.
So it says body times 1 for the stunned line.
Yes, correct. I said
Okay.
the wrong thing.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
And it's
2
10
is
points
the
per point of
right.
body, so if you want 11 body after the 10th,
10
it's going to be
points.
10 points. And then 20
Right.
points for 12. Okay.
You got it. Well, let me say that again when I'm not talking too fast. The value that you would know is stun, which is the number of points you take and then you eventually are knocked out when you go to 0. We call that knockout because it's being knocked out. So the word stun is now reserved for being momentarily stunned. And then there's endurance, and that's what's 3 times body. That's what I was meant to say. So yes, those are there. But you don't have to use points for those. You get the body, and then you get all those values.
Mm-hmm.
So
Which is
so
why
those
body's
3 are all.
expensive.
Yes, correct. And so that's basically the way this works for characteristics. Defense, actually, I take that back. Defense is now a single number. There's no physical versus energy defense. I still have resistant defenses. There is an attack called piercing, which means body damage gets right through. And so it's not armor piercing as it used to be in the old rules. Piercing means the body damage gets right through. It's an advantage. Piercing's defense is defined by that particular application. Resistant defenses are one way to stop it. So resistant defenses are much more point heavy. You will be faced with less direct body damage in this system than you would be in other versions. It's fairly pricey. Both the really vicious body damaging attacks and the defenses that are specifically against those attacks, both of them have been priced up hard. So it exists, but there's less of it. There's kind of a belief that unless I've got 12 points of resistant defenses, that my character is going to die when some punk plugs them with a gun. And that's not the case in this system. So that punk would have to represent a considerable number of points in order to do that sort of damage to you. And in fact, you should know another thing. This system does not model ordinary people. This character creation system. It is not generic. It starts at 200 points and goes up. We can talk about skill stuff if you want. You'll see that it's pretty similar to the original skills of the 3rd edition, or first, second, third edition. There's those very, task-oriented skills. Can I break, can I sneak my way into this complex by hacking its, security cameras? And then you also have what I'm calling maneuver skills. They either give you new maneuvers or they give you bonuses to maneuvers that you don't ordinarily have. You will notice there's something called mental maneuvers, which is actually a bank of about 5 maneuvers that you get with those 10 points that other people don't have, that are based on ego. Interestingly enough, you might have those without having any ego-based powers, and that's okay. Because, interestingly enough, many of them are defensive.
Yeah, I'm taking that because my mind's going to be a bit alien since it's part plant.
Right. Yeah, perfect. So as I like to talk about, when, Super Psycho, zaps you, we get to watch Super Psycho go, your plant-based cognition is resisting my, my mojo. So it makes a lot of sense. So that's kind of cool. The martial arts are broken into 3 types. Find weakness is now one of them, and it works a little differently than it did before. Basically, it adds dice to your effect. And then you have, it's also cumulative. You use it multiply on a given character and your dice go up, which is kind of nice. And then you have martial attacks, and then you have the martial moves. So those are very different phenomena.
I'm
So you can.
I'm feeling that base of where 200 being the lowest character, because I'm building with a modern 350 400 equivalent in mind on newer systems. I'm like, I haven't gotten to powers yet. I'm at 170 spent. I think I need to go back and drop
Yeah.
some. We'll see.
Yeah. It's worth remembering that all of the wonderful superheroes that we know and love began their careers far less powered than we're used to seeing them.
Yep.
When you're looking at like flashes and blasts, what is like in a current champions? A lot of people work with this 60 active points. Where is a good point for effectiveness in your opinion on the way things are constructed?
Well, on the way things are constructed, it's not that different. As I say, there's more bang for buck here. And most of the characters that I'll present in the rules, you'll see 40 points as the solid go. Particularly because one of the places where I encourage people to not be too pricey or not be too enthusiastic is defenses. Let's keep those defenses down. We can keep the powers down a little, and we all see the same things happen. Why inflate? Why pump it up with gas? More than we have to. So
World of Warcraft, where from
Yeah.
one expansion to another expansion, you just add a zero at
Yeah,
the
exactly.
end, but you're
Yeah.
doing the same damage.
Exactly correct. And so let's just go back to basics. The I would say 40 and 45 points are very nice. 8, 9 die 6 is very nice and punchy in this system. As I say, it's quite similar, but there's a little more bang per unit in general.
So my character would need a few experience points to really feel effective at the moment.
And that's a good thing.
I have
But
a
let's take a
4d6
look.
blast is all I could afford after everything else. But
Let's
I'm
think
done.
about what did you have in mind for. We can talk a little more about this. What are we looking at with your character power wise right now?
Okay. Well, I can go through my character. Let me just go through from the top, and then we'll get to what I have
Sure.
experience on the last part. So I put 20 points into presence. That gives me 4d6. That's the only thing I spent in that category. I spent one.
Hold on. You spent 10 points, which gives you 46 because you start at 2d6 base.
Sorry. Yes, that's what I meant. I typoed. So thank you. So that gave me 10 points back. Good. I have.
Yes, that's a start, right? Good.
Great. Let me fix that. So I already know where that 10 points went. So I have 11 body, 10 points. Speed, 3. It actually is very much with the 3 pillars that I had in mind initially. I was looking at being a very quick character because I have, the vines in my mind and such like that. I spent nothing in Dex. I spent 3 points into intelligence. Wait.
30, you mean?
Yeah, I spent 30 into intelligence, and I actually had already dropped that. Oh well. 30 points in intelligence and 10 points into ego. So that brought me up to 14 int and 10 ego. So that's
11. Sorry. 12 ego.
12
ego. Yes. Yeah, I accidentally wrote. No.
Really? Yeah.
I accidentally wrote 13 intelligence after putting 30 points down, so ego messing that up, I'm not surprised. But I just.
And I also want to say that I really suffered over having different base levels for 10 base in those first 3, and then 11 base for the next 3.
No,
I suffered. I wanted really, really badly for them all to have the same base and make the whole thing transparent that way, and it made the whole thing topple. So I really had to bite the bullet on that one.
Oh, no, I totally understand. I actually knew that they were different. I went and was tweaking the points over and over trying to get some points back, and so yeah.
I totally do it. Yeah.
And so my tweaking messed it up. But yes, I put 10 points in ego, that gave me 12. I put 30 points into int, which brought me to a 14. I actually meant to bring that back down to a 13 int, but I'll go back later.
I think that's a good idea if you do, because to be real nasty about this, the percentage points of effectiveness that you get from 13 to 14 are quite small.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back down to that. So that totals me out at 70 points, 80 points. Yep, 80 points on the first, in the characteristics.
First go,
yep.
Right.
I bought 10 points worth of utility skills. I bought detective work and stealth. Both of those are going to link into my power when I get to that, which is why I wanted to go back to this. I bought acrobatics and mental discipline, like I talked about. I have a foreign mind, an alien mind.
Right.
And acrobatics, I was again looking at tying into the manipulation of plants and using plants for my acrobatic maneuvers.
Right. I kind of like that. Yeah.
And which is why I wanted to go back and talk about all my stats before I just went straight to powers. I bought no situational skills. And then for my powers, I bought 3 things. I bought awareness, which is going to be 20 point base, 10 additional points for utilizing plants to see through. And I'm trying to finagle the points, and I think I might have the points to finagle the ability to analyze and actually be able to individualize people through my sense. But I only have a blast of 4d6 right now, which is 20 points, and then a entangle of 3d6, which is 30 points.
Might I make a suggestion?
Please do.
There are 3 frameworks available for powers, or in general. One of them is almost exactly the way it was in the original rules, and it is a humpbacked mathematical monstrosity.
Okay.
It was then, and it kind of still is. It kind of still is now.
Okay.
And everybody avoided it because the math was just totally different from the rest of the game. But it's what you need. And this is the infamous elemental control.
I love elemental controls.
And the way that the elemental control works in this game, which is very similar to the original, the powers in them must cost endurance. And if you make that awareness cost endurance, which I think is kind of cool for your character,
it works. I will totally go to that.
Yeah. So, then the 3 of those things can go into the elemental control, and you can have considerably more oomph in them.
Elemental control plants. Sounds awesome. Yeah. I will totally do that, and I am very aware of elemental control. Yes. Elemental control is awesome.
And so this also will now let us think, now that we brought in limitation, we can start thinking of limitations in general, and we'll hang on to it for just a moment. So, but that's actually a really nice setup for your character, I think. If you wanted to, I am actually put more work into the advantages, into the limitations more than anything else in the game. I thought very hard about them, and some of them are similar to what you're familiar with, and others are very much not. You will note a couple. There's a difference between something that is conditional versus something that is constrained. There is there's one called shutdown, which means that you actually drop your attention out of the world. It's a little bit like what they call concentration in other forms of the hero system. And then there's a couple of advantages. I'm not necessarily suggesting any of these. I'm just calling your attention to some of the weird ones. There's an advantage called separate, which means the power actually detaches and operates on its own. And that's the way, for example, you would send out your astral form. You are actually using the power of flight and some form of awareness, or teleport, or however it is you want the thing to move around, and sending it out there. If you want to be like the kind of character who goes comatose at the same time, then you get shut down with it. So you see, you use these little components of different advantages and limitations to build something that is literally, conceptually, 1,000% different from somebody else with the same power. So that's a real big deal, is that you...
Just like in modern hero system, you have like a billion limitations on one power.
Right. And so it's very creative. Now, there's a couple of constraints on how much you can do it. There's a mathematical constraint you may be interested in. But there's a couple of others that I would like to call to your attention. One is called expanded scope, and it is available for movement powers and for awareness. Expanded scope is quite interesting in that your default form of awareness or flight or teleport or something like that is very much situational. You, the room you're in, the immediate environment. And if you want to have expanded scope on, for example, flight, you can, but it's not just an expansion of what you already have. It's a separate category. So somebody who has regional flight can move in a way that we think of as ordinary movement, although it may take a little while, to just zip around the city. And we're not going to like clock it, right? We say, okay, you can zip around the city. That's not instantaneously. You still got to fly from here to there, and we got a basic idea of what that means for you. But it's not buying more flight. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to zip around the city is not just buying more ordinary flight. It's a different kind of flight. In story terms, it's a different kind of flight.
When Flash in Justice League, goes into the Speed Force in the cartoon, and that's because he's run like around the world several times.
He has global scope on it. He has global scope on his running. It's a form of his running. Yeah, and so note that this also applies to awareness, and it also applies to interesting things like dimensions. So, for example, if you want expanded scope for movement and you want to do dimensions, get flight or teleport or whatever you want, any movement, and expand the scope for dimensions, and now you can travel among them. They just can. So, so expanded scope is kind of a big deal. It's a game-defining thing. If somebody takes expanded scope, the whole group changes. Right, the whole nature of where the group's attention can be directed toward and what can happen and where they can go changes.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all things to consider as well. So back to Brandon, where are we at with some of the things?
So first thing, the little fractions that we have after the advantages or disadvantages, are those working in the same fashion?
Exactly the same as you're used to. And the only reason that I stuck them, that you're looking at them in that draft that way, is that we're going to have a better graphic presentation of them in the actual rules, but we're not bothering with it because this is just, the text that I'm giving to the layout guy.
Yeah.
So,
The concept, I left my strength alone at 2d6. I didn't see him really as strong. The presence with the light manifestation, as well as that musical element when he manifested, I thought that the presence would come up. So I've, similar to Alice, I'm at 4d6 of presence, spending 10 points. Dexterity, I'm at a 13 on, spending 20 points. It was... I can see him being, kind of better in general than people physically, but I didn't know if 13 was too much.
Actually, 13 is very much the sweet spot of effectiveness for all. It's like, well, it's a 3d6 roll. You're used to the 3d6 roll. 13 or less is when you're going, okay, I'm good. I'm going to miss once in a while. I'm not going to make it once in a while, but I can eat that. I'm good with 13. 14 is when you've kind of overkilled it. So, good enough.
I brought up to a 12. He's, smarter, but he's not a genius or anything like that. Ego, I left alone. Body, I have not decided on what my investiture in that is.
Let's take a look at in terms of endurance. Another thing you'll notice is that endurance is much simpler in this game. There's no nuances of charges that cost no endurance. There's no endurance batteries. There's none of that stuff. You can define your endurance as a battery if you want to, and there are limitations you can take that might represent that. But you're not getting any way out of spending your endurance.
Yeah.
And there's a 0 endurance advantage, but it's real hefty. And then the idea being that this is a game where I want the characters sucking wind. I want heroes worrying about eating into their knockout because they're tired. And for the whole point is that the second half of a physical confrontation, unless they're able to close it fast, like instantly, that second half of the confrontation is a whole different ballgame. Everybody's sucking wind. Everybody's trying to set up the perfect shot. Everybody's fighting dirty.
Mhm.
because they don't know if they can make it. I also want to point something out. Pushing is different now. Pushing, from the get-go, you don't know how much more experience or how much more endurance you're going to have to spend. You will be rolling dice to find out how much endurance you lose. You can't be sure how much endurance you're going to lose. Second, and even more fun, you can push for effects that otherwise would be advantages. Say you have a blast, you want area effect, push. Stuff like that.
Yeah,
There's
that's
a list of them.
that's
Yeah.
something that we've done in our home games, basically.
Yeah.
Something similar, and just because it makes sense,
Yeah.
it comes up in the
And
books
so
all the
if
time.
you want your blast to be piercing all the time because that's what it's like, that's fine. But if you really want, I'm trying to remember if piercing is one of them. Let's take area effect. If you want it to be area effect all the time, that's fine. If you want it to be area effect this freaking time, blow a ton of endurance, roll and see how much you lose, and you get to have it be area effect.
Which just
So-
convinced me not to take area effect was one I was looking at and kind of
Right.
thinking of, because light you could see that way, and I was like,
Sure.
I don't love it, but being able to do that convinces me.
Yeah,
don't bother
that
with
was
it.
a big part of it too. I didn't want to like make people have to eat and advantage costs just for things that would be fun to do once in a while, particularly for attacks. I wanted to throw most of the decision making. You may notice this. I threw most of the decision making to be about endurance during play rather than point spending before play.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I want the decisions made, is in play about your energy expenditure, but not so much as, or much less so anyway, about, oh my God, I didn't spend the points right, I'm screwed. I don't want that kind of problem happening. So if we go back to the elemental control, Alice, are you finding that the plants are coming across okay? Did you put it at 20 points maybe, or 25 or something?
So I wanted to find out from you, because in elemental control, I just read over it. Is it costing the same as a VPP, or because there's no cost listed for it?
Right.
For the
Well, the
framework?
way it works is that unlike the VPP, which has a pool and a control,
Right.
this
one has
has
no pool,
a
just
control and slots.
Right.
And just to complete the pattern, a multiform has a pool and slots, but no control. So there's those are three different values, basically. So the way it would work is this. Let's say that we had an elemental control that we're going to rate at 20 points.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no pool. There's just this thing called the control.
Control of 20 points.
And so, right. And then it has slots. So if I were to draw 3 slots for your 3 powers.
I actually want 4 slots.
Okay, 4 slots, no
Teleport
problem.
3 plants.
Yeah. So we got our aware, we got our blast, we got our entangle, and we got our
Teleport.
teleport. Beauty. Yep. Okay. So we've got this. And then there are a couple of things. One, they all have to cost endurance, which is good. We know about that. We have to modify one of them for that purpose, but we don't have to worry about that right now. What we need is to make sure that their power points are at least 40 each. For ease, let's just make them 40 each without making ourselves suffer.
That
40 points of teleport.
I can have analyze, and I can have not protected from flash or concealment. So
right. That is what I remember when you described it. I was ticking in my head saying, "Can she get that up to 40?" And the answer was yes.
That goes to 35.
Yeah.
Which. Yep.
Okay. Well, make it a little more interesting. Toss in the Well, it's unusual sense too, isn't it?
It's an unusual sense. Sorry, that's 45 total. So I would
Right.
drop it.
45. Good.
Yeah, 45.
Yeah. So we're good. So it has to be at least 40. So 45 is fine.
That's 40.
So if we get 40 points of blast, 40 points of entangle, and 40 points of teleport, all of those are very, very situationally functional in this game. So you're not going to be teleporting like, through the dimensions or over to the rainforest yet. But at this point, here in the city park, you can be anywhere you want. So, or close. So what we have here is, what's nice is that teleport is awareness-based within your range. So by using your awareness, you can teleport to places you can't see as long as they're in your range.
Mm-hmm.
through the plants that are there, which is nice. Okay, I kind of like the idea of being able to teleport into someone's office because they have a pot of geraniums there.
That's the way I thought about that. And someone's office,
Yeah.
I could just yeah.
Yeah, so you've got that going.
Mm-hmm.
So here, now what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 20 from each one. A good way of looking at it as a prepay, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've sort of prepaid those 20 points into each of these. So right now we're looking at 25, 20, 20, and 20. Now let's go ahead and put that cost endurance business onto the awareness. Did you see the number that goes with the cost endurance?
No, I had not found that yet.
Okay, it's in the limitations.
Okay, yeah, I haven't gotten to the limitations on the different powers yet.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Speaking of which, Brandon, did you want to look up and down some of the advantages or limitations and things that look interesting to you?
The only advantage I thought was really necessary was effects desolid on the light blast.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Ooh, cost endurance is 1/2. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Well, remember, this is all or nothing in this game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't tweak endurance; you eat it, or you eat it, or you get rid of it. Right?
Round up or round down.
So, what we do is the old rule, which is that for anything that's not 0.5, it goes the way you expect.
Okay.
And for anything that's 0.5, you choose the way that works best for you.
Oh, okay.
Right. So in this case, we got 25 with 1.5. And so that would give us what? 16, 17? I forgot. I should have that in my head.
Yeah, that'd be 16.
16, no problem. Okay, so out of curiosity, if we had that's 70. If we don't have anything else in there, that's 76 points for the elemental control as a whole. Or wait, is that 96? Right?
20.
Or 90? Yeah, that's 96.
96, yeah.
Now, how much do you have in your skills right now overall?
Everything else is 110, so I'm slightly over right now if I go with 96, but that's tweakable easily.
Yeah, well, we can play with this a little bit. I don't recall you putting anything into defense, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to suggest that we look up and down a couple more limitations.
That sounds fine with me, yeah. I hadn't gotten to limitations yet, so...
Take a peek.
Yep.
I actually, given your concept for your character, the teleport looks like it might be interesting. Depending, unless you want it to be a real reliable thing for your character, that's cool too.
Yeah, I'm going to look at my disads and get back to you. So you're welcome to go back to Brandon for a bit. Yeah.
So I will point out a couple other things about limitations. There's an interesting thing. For example, now this doesn't apply to you really necessarily, but I just want to get it across to people or to you. Say you want ammunition, right? Something that's ammunition based. Mm-hmm. So you would run out of ammunition potentially. The way that works in this game is just a burnout roll. You know, because remember, the fun part about ammunition whenever it comes to stories is not, I know I have one left. It's instead, I hope I have one left. So the point is you roll after every use to see if you just ran out. So anyway, that's just letting you know there's some very interesting limitations to play with.
Cool.
Is your teleporting is plant specific, right? You need to have plants around? Okay. Yes. So that's actually a pretty nice conditional. That's a pretty nice conditional limitation right there.
Yes. There's some nice easy limitations that I can do.
Yeah. Yeah. So and I think that'll help with a couple other things, particularly your defense. You can use a you can use a defensive power, not a movement power. Never mind. Okay, worry about that later. Brandon, where are we at?
So the last characteristic I was looking at speed 2, I didn't see them as being, quick on the actions necessarily. Just keeping up on that. I was looking at for powers and elemental control similarly, flight, desolid, flash, and a blast that affects desolids. The flight, I'm kind of trying to decide if regional or not, and just looking at the way the points break down if I apply that.
It's so tempting, isn't it? Just remember,
Yeah.
remember, however, that if you want to be able to fly like in flight, like in combat, fly from here to there, and get regional flight, that's 2 flights.
Oh, okay.
You might want to grade up, later.
Yeah, so then probably not bother with the regional.
Yeah.
And so since 40's a sweet spot, looking at doing it at 40, which would be about 120 points of powers, because the blast is a 60-point power total after it affects the desolidified characters.
Cool. So with this going on, I think that the logic of why I bother with their original point system ever in the first place, and why I don't do some sort of totally different game with a totally different structure, is because at this point, right now, is where you start making very creative decisions. The fact that you have to jiggle your points a little bit, the fact that you have to go, I'm a little over, I got a few more, that little jiggle right there is actually very much an opportunity for your creativity to go into a different gear. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure you guys have experienced that before.
Yep, lots.
And this is designed to optimize that moment.
I will say, though, that I am far too accustomed when it comes to playing with hero system to using a crutch called the Hero Designer, because it is the most intuitive character generator I have ever seen in all my 20-some-odd years of gaming. It is the most intuitive thing. You just click, 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 and it's super, super well done. Mm-hmm. So I'm very accustomed to the crutch. So doing this all manually right now is kind of a little slower than I'm accustomed to. I would have had this done.
Okay, yeah. It's a lot quicker, I think, than any of the other forms of champions.
Yes, I agree with that.
This particular one. But on the other hand, I also want to point out that the special effects, which is to say the fact that it's plants, or the fact that it's this crystalline, semi-divine light thing, that matters a lot in early champions and in this game. The term that's used in later game versions is stunting, right? The idea that you can stunt your special effect into some other application. In early champions and in champions now, there's no term for that. We just call that play. You're always stunting. A good way of looking at it is the stuff on your sheet is just stuff that you stunt regularly. So the idea being is that you have all kinds of situational wiggles for your powers and your character in general based on our aesthetic appreciation of what your character looks like, or whatever psychobabble is involved in what your power is. Just go ahead and run with it. There's some rules for this. I have a whole chapter on this in special effects. What are the rules for special effects? And the point is that you can make it a very joyous, you can make this a very joyous aspect of play. That if you have, for example, your divinity-ish thing going on, that there could be some sort of bizarre feedback that occurs with someone else who has a very similar justification or special effect, someone else who has some other very religious or spiritual kind of power. The two of you in concert together could have harmonic effects of who knows what. Mm-hmm. Right? And that kind of thing is wonderfully on tap all the time.
And I just redid the math on some things. The awareness actually cost me 13 points, not 16.
Oh, excellent.
So.
Okay. Are you sure about that? Because that's 25 at a half limitation, not 20.
Oh, that's right. Because we did because I was recalculating everything at 20 That's why. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'll just double check the math there. Thank you.
Yeah. And so I think
So
you're going to come out
so
okay.
16 was correct.
Yeah, and 13 perhaps for the teleport if you want to give it that half limitation for the plant dependence.
Yeah, I was also thinking, in addition to plant dependence, that the teleportation could be skill roll required.
Cool. Yeah. So what skill would it be? Oh yeah, it would be based on what, the acrobatics or something, or
Yeah, I was
or
thinking
what?
like either acrobatics or having to roll some sort of intelligence roll because I have to figure out
Right.
the aim.
If it perfect. If there's a
That's
limitation
tiny.
for that. No, there's a limitation for that.
Okay,
It's
let's find
called
the
tricky.
geranium.
Yeah, go find tricky.
I actually scrolled right to tricky.
Yeah. And so tricky is exactly what you're talking about. It's when there's some element of it that the whole point being is that if you fail your tricky roll, it'll put you somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
You'll end up at the geranium, and the geranium isn't where you thought it was.
Yep.
Which sounds exactly right for what you're talking about.
Yes. Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's based on a characteristic roll, and you pick which characteristic you want. You just said intelligence, rock and roll.
Fantastic. Right. Thank you.
So, I'm quite fond of tricky and side effects and a few of the others. There's a world of hurt waiting for you of your choosing in all the ways these things can intersect. So, cool. Let's kind of stop here for a second before your characters are 100% finalized in points. Because you can do that a little bit on your own. It's always good to let it bake for a little bit, and then you look at it again the next morning and go, oh, yeah.
Right. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. So let's stop there and say I got a nice view. I've got this older... Wait, no. We got these two younger characters. Mm-hmm. We've got the glowy crystalline, and a solid...
Crystalline was Nick, who dropped out.
Right. Sorry, glowy man. Your situation, on the other hand, is the glowing light, right?
Yeah, lights and with a coral side effect.
Yeah. So then we've also got in your situation, I don't really have a visual for your character yet, Alice.
Oh, well, I actually was looking at being, like I said, I'm mixed heritage. When I'm in superhero identity, I literally transform so that my skin starts taking on like a barkish thing, and I can generate vines and such out of my fingers. My hair, kind of can do the Medusa thing with as plants, those kinds of things. And so I have like just basically plant hair, plant dreadlocks, and my fingernails are plant leaves. I have barky skin, which would be a distinct feature in my superheroic identity, which I might tweak points on. And basically.
No, that's quite. I got it. Now, if you want, you can check out my particular construction of instant change, which is very graded.
I will definitely do so.
Yeah, I mean, just as a thing to check out. You may not even need to have it if what you're talking about is basically treated in. I mean, if it takes you as long to shift as it takes for a person to change clothes, then you don't need instant change.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Right.
I'm still not sure if I'm going to be an instant change or not.
Yeah, that's totally up to you, but it's one of those sort of late stage, how many points kind of things. And then, what about for your character? What, Brandon? What are we? I don't know whether we're going with like this real kind of serene, hippie-looking guy, or whether we're talking about any other kind of look, or what did you have in mind?
For some reason, the image that I kind of got was, or the inspiration was, I think it's John Romita Jr. on the X-Men, when there are these two Morlocks that are really throwaway characters, and one of them can be totally flat, and they are hitching a ride back to Morlock tunnels because the Marauders are on their tail, and just the art look for that, and so that's kind of what got me to the light and like a stained glass kind of look or something like that.
Okay.
And that goes to the neat solid on the ability to pass through, and so. But generally, superhero manifested. They have the mixed ethnicity They are producing light, definitely not hippie, much more business approach. To go with that, do not dishonor your family. You have the hair of a girl.
Okay. So we've got actually more of a severe or formally dressed looking kind of situation.
Yeah.
Okay. But we are talking sort of an outfit, correct?
Yeah, definitely. Superheroes wear outfits.
Okay. So we've got this whole.
I make my outfit.
I was going to say, I mean, some just sort of become their outfit, but that's good enough. So, so what we're looking at here is a fairly good visual. What do you see the two of you working together to do? So in some ways that asks, whom do you fight? Whom do you try to stop? Whom do you try to inspire? How do you present yourself in terms of your purpose?
I was picturing something along the lines of corporately based supervillains, so like Kingpin,
Right.
Eric Worthington, other ones similar. I'm trying to think of other ones. Sorry, I'm a little tiny bit distracted right now.
Lex Luthor.
Lex Luthor, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so sorry, I just got.
I'm getting that. So the idea being that you see at this moment, anyway, given these two very, we might call them, if your characters aren't specifically and personally marginalized in terms of being truly grounds down, you can see it from here, right? Both of you can see marginalization from here. Sometimes the way people treat you, like the unusual looks, sometimes through your family and friends and what they actually have to go through as danger, stuff like that. Your characters can see marginalization from here. So I'm actually seeing you guys are after what you might call the cancer in the body politic, right?
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with stopping bank robbers. This has nothing to do with stopping muggers, although, but this isn't the 80s. We're not going to posit the place with roaming muggers, after everybody.
I also, I specifically pictured my character being a bit of an activist, so.
Sure. So who knows? It may well be, right. It may well be that you guys are, the two of you, are pretty much, hey, let's go after, we know where our problems come from. Our problems come from corrupt institutions. Neither of you, has anything good to say about ICE, and neither of you has anything good to say about the economic circumstances of you guys. And you guys, compared to most of your family and friends, are actually the successful ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
First one in the family to get in college, kind of thing.
Right.
Pride of the family.
And how much fun and success does that look like at about right this point?
Not much.
So yeah, exactly. So you guys are saying, all right, we are going to strike a blow, and you guys are looking for where you're going to strike that blow. Mm-hmm. So it seems kind of interesting to me. I like that image. Brandon, is this kind of like moving for you where Alice is talking about?
By all means, I can take the character and apply some of that. For me, I was definitely, looking at the, some of the classic supervillain type stuff and all, but with what Alice is talking about, I can definitely see the ground down aspect and such.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you very much for coming on and doing this.
And thanks for the interest in this little project.
It's not a little project by any means, and we are very happy.
For me, man, who knew? This is like my sacred cow of role playing games, early champions, and I really didn't know what would happen if I laid my hands on it.
So I'm going to sign us off at this point. And so thank you everyone for watching BWK's character creation segment for Champions Now. And stay tuned for an actual play with us and a upcoming Banff interview about this game. So if you want to learn more, stay tuned.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I'm going to be talking about those dynamics in play and stuff
yes,
like that.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, that's why you guys met me.
So yeah.
Right. Good deal.
And we will be talking about a lot more about this game, both in Banff and BWK, so please stay tuned. Bye,
Thanks
everyone.
much. Bye, everybody.